Om Vishwandarpana Drishyamana Nagari Tulyannijantargatam Pashyannatmani Mayaya Bahirivodbhutam Yatha Nidraya Yasakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Svatmanamevadvayam Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Nama Idam Shri Dakshinamurtaye. Om Narayanam Padmabhuvam Vasishtham Shaktin cha Tatputra Parasharam cha Vyasan Shukham Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindra Mathasya Shishyam Shri Shankaracharya Mathasya Padma Padam cha Hastamalakam cha Shishyam Tantotakam Vatikakara Manyan अस्मद्गुरून् सन्ततमानतोऽस्मि श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः परब्रह्मनिष्ठं स्वतो धर्मनिष्ठम् अहिंसैकनिष्ठं स्वशिष्यै सुजुष्टं यतीनां वरिष्ठं गुरूणां गरिष्ठं दयानन्दरूपं मदाचार्यमीडे नमः श्री परमार्थाय संसाराध्यासनाशिने श्रोत्रियब्रह्मनिष्ठाय तस्मै ब्रह्मविदे नमः सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् Om. I welcome you all to this 6th class of the Fundamentals of Vedanta series. We started off with the question of what is it that we are really seeking in life? And we said that even though each of us may be seeking different things, if we look at it specifically, the need behind the need, what is the goal behind the goal? If we look at it, it is unconditional fulfillment. We want fulfillment at all times, at all places. Fulfillment that's not constrained by anything. But we find ourselves helpless because of so many reasons at the family level, at the professional level, at the possessions level, at our body level, at our mind level. And this gap seems unbridgeable. In fact, it is unbridgeable. What I want is Purnatvam, unconditional fulfillment. But what I find myself to be is Apurnaha, very limited in terms of fulfillment. So we said the Prayojanam of Vedanta study is exactly this Purnatvam that we all are seeking. And in this context, we looked at the Anubandha Chatushtayam, the fourfold factors that bind the student to the study of Vedanta. If these factors are present, then that's like Fevicol that sticks the student with the study. So the first factor is the Prayojanam, and the Prayojanam of Vedanta study is this Purnatvam. And then we looked at the Vishayaha, the subject matter of Vedanta, and we said it is Paramatma, Jivatma, Jivatma, Paramatma, Aikyam. The oneness of this individual Jivatma with Paramatma, the ultimate reality. And how does this study lead to the Purnatvam? We looked at the Sambandha, the connection. And the connection is that Vedanta, the words of Vedanta are the revealer. The revealer, and Atma is the revealed. This I is the revealed. So Vedanta, the words of Vedanta reveal the Atma, and they reveal the Atma as being one with Paramatma. And when this knowledge rises in the mind, then it shows me this knowledge reveals my own Purnatvam. So that is the connection. And finally, we came to the Adhikari, the one who is the candidate. And we said the candidate should be a seeker of this Purnatvam directly. The candidate should have experienced the things of this world and figured out that they are not leading me to this Purnatvam that I am seeking. And so this candidate is the one who seeks this Purnatvam directly. And that person, that candidate is called a Mumukshuhu. This Purnatvam and Moksha are synonymous. Therefore, this candidate is called a Mumukshuhu. That is the first criteria. But then we also said that this candidate should see the invariable connection between the study of Vedanta, the indispensable connection between the study of Vedanta and the rise of this knowledge. And so the seeker of moksha should become a seeker of knowledge. And that is why we say the second criteria is that this person should be a jigyasuhu. And then the third criteria we said is that this person should have chitta shuddhi, which are certain preparedness of the mind. Because these qualifications, certain qualifications are required for the message of Vedanta to sink in. Then we got into the question of how does an adhikari become this adhikari? And we said by pursuing various experiences of the world and learning from those experiences, what those experiences can give me and what they cannot give me. And this is where we got into the study of the Purushartha Chatushtayam, because the Purusharthas classify the various human goals. Dharmartha Kama Mokshakhyam Purushartha Chatushtayam. So there are these 4 Purusharthas, broadly classifying all possible human goals. And we said the Artha and Kama Purushartha, they are common with animals also. Common between humans and animals. The word Purushartha means Purushanam Artha, the goals of human beings. But the Artha and Kama are common with animals also. Rakshartham Arthyate, that which we seek for our security is Artha. And we see the animals also securing themselves with food, clothing. There is no clothing for animals, but food, shelter. And they store their future food, etc. And Kama Purushartha, pleasure seeking is there with animals also. And that is there with humans. Sukhartham kamyate iti kamaha. So Artha and Kama cover these range of goals. That a large variety of goals fall into this. And we said the whole of materialism is basically based on Artha and Kama. But we said this cannot lead us to the Purnatvam. No matter how hard we try with Artha and Kama, it can never lead us to Purnatvam. That is like somebody who wants to reach a particular destination but takes right and left turns as one wishes. Will one ever reach the destination? One needs guidance from a higher source, like a GPS, for example. And the Shastra is what gives us this higher guidance. Shasanat prayate, that which commands me and protects me, and that which instructs me, teaches me and protects me. So the Shastra is twofold. There is Veda Purva, the first part of the Veda that commands me and protects me, and the second part of the Veda that is Vedanta that teaches me and protects me. The first part teaches me Dharma Purushartha, and the second part teaches me Moksha Purushartha. So there are these 2 additional Purusharthas that I come to know through the Shastra. And then we were analyzing the meaning of Dharma in the context of Dharma Purushartha. And we said we will look at 3 meanings. So the first meaning that we were discussing was Chodana Lakshanaha Arthaha Dharmaha. This is from the Jaimini Sutras, the Mimamsa Sutras. This is a very second sutra. Athato dharma jigyasa chodana lakshana artha dharma. This defines dharma as the lifestyle governed by the commandments of the Veda. The commandments in terms of vidhi and nishedha, do's and don'ts. And we saw examples of this. They are basically duties, attitudes, and values. We saw examples. Satyam vada, dharmanchara, swadhyayaan ma pramadaha, satyanna pramaditavyam, dharmanna pramaditavyam, swadhyaya pravachanabhyanna pramaditavyam. देवपितृकार्याभ्यान्न प्रमदितव्यं मातृदेवो भव पितृदेवो भव आचार्यदेवो भव अतिथिदेवो भव. So there are these duties, values, and attitudes. And these duties can further be divided as yajna, danam, and tapaha. Yajna corresponding to the Panchamaha Yajna, and the tapaha corresponding to the austerity and discipline that one has to have in life. And then we transition to the second meaning of dharma. We said this human being has a free will. Unlike all the other creatures and plants around me, they just do their thing as if they are programmed. Like we said, the bush flowers every season. No, but it doesn't have a choice. It just does it because it's designed to do that. Similarly, there are microbes in my gut, and they just do their thing. They don't have a choice in terms of do I do this or do I do that. So all other creatures are programmed, and when all other creatures they do their jobs, then there is wonderful harmony. There is the order. The entire order is sustained. The problem is when the human being comes in, because the human being has a free will, and the human being can then do something, choose a wrong course of action potentially. So the human being has a choice of right and wrong, and the human being can do something that is wrong. The other creatures are incapable of doing something that is wrong. So the human being survives on this entire infrastructure, and therefore there is a duty for the human being to contribute to the sustenance of this infrastructure. And that is what right action then becomes. Right action is that which sustains this whole infrastructure. We saw the various examples like players in a football game. We said there would be a huge amount of confusion if the goalkeeper starts to run around. The right action for the goalkeeper is to stay put at the goalpost. We saw the example of the orchestra. And the orchestra, each musician is assigned a certain job, a certain note to play at a certain time. And when all the musicians do their jobs, there is beautiful music. In fact, that's where the word harmony comes from, I suppose. It's harmonious. Whereas if people start to do their own thing according to their likes and dislikes, then there is disharmony, cacophony. You can't stand that music. And similarly, we looked at the machine where each bolt and each gear, when it just does its job, then the machine functions beautifully. So this world is also very similar. It's a very complex system of interdependence. What I breathe out, the trees breathe in, and what the trees breathe out, I breathe in. And then there is this relationship between the form and function that we have to see. That each form is capable of a certain function. And when it does its function well, then the harmony is sustained. If you take the example of an earthworm, its form is designed to make holes in the ground. And somehow when it does its job, the fertility of the soil is maintained. Whereas a honeybee's job is to fly around and cross-pollinate. And when it does its job, then there are fruits that come from flowers. So there's this connection between the form and function, which has relevance on what our duty is also. So We saw this. Dharanat dharma. Dharana, the word dharana means sustenance. So because something sustains, that becomes dharma. Dharana dharma. There's an entire shloka that says, Dharana dharma ityahuhu. Dharmo dharayati prajaha. Yasya dharana sanyuktaha sa dharmaha iti nishchayaha. It says that because something sustains, that is dharmaha. Dharana dharmaha ityahuhu. Dharmo dharayati prajaha. This dharma sustains, this right action sustains all the beings here. And yasyat dharana sanyuktaha, that which is associated with dharana, that which is associated with sustenance, harmony, saha dharmaha iti nishchayaha. That is definitely dharma. That which sustains the order and the harmony in this entire creation, that is dharma. This is the second meaning of dharma. And it's a consequence of the first meaning. When I do my duties with the right values and right attitudes, then that leads to sustenance. So then we got into what is this sustenance at what level? I said there are 4 different levels we can look at. The first is the individual level. The individual has to be sustained. There has to be harmony within the individual. And then at the family level, the family harmony and family sustenance is important. And at the society level, at the community level, and at the entire environmental level. And we took the individual harmony first to see how dharma promotes individual harmony and how lack of dharma means lack of right action, how it goes against individual harmony. So we said the right action for an individual is largely known by common sense. I know how I want to be treated. I don't want to be lied to. I don't want to be cheated. I don't want to be hurt. Everybody knows this. I don't want to be treated arrogantly by somebody. When I am in trouble, I am hoping that somebody will help me. So these are what I expect from others. And so similarly, I know that the others also expect the same from me. This is common sense. Nobody needs to be taught this. So then why does one still not act right? And we took the example of why does one lie? And we said that there is this value for truth definitely in everybody, like we said, with common sense. But then I apply it rigorously to everybody's behavior towards me. Because why does this common sense arise? It is because I know how I want to be treated. So the root cause of why this common sense arises, I know how I want to be treated. Therefore, I apply it rigorously to everybody. But when it comes to myself, I don't clearly see the value of the value. I don't see what I lose if I were to lie. I don't see this. I want everybody else to not lie to me, but I don't see what I lose if I were to compromise truth. So we did an inquiry into this. And we said, when such a situation happens, when I applied rigorously to everybody, but not to myself, we called it a half value. It's a half value. And we said we have to see the problem that these half value causes. When it comes in conflict with a fully assimilated value, for example, value for money is fully assimilated. I have no confusion that I want this. I want money because it is desirable, it buys me comforts. So when there is a conflict between the half value and the fully assimilated value for money, we said naturally the fully assimilated value for money wins because I see myself gaining money in a certain transaction. But if I were to compromise on the truth, I don't see myself as losing anything. In fact, in some cases, if I were to reveal the truth, I may lose the money. Like we saw in the example of selling a used car. I know that the car has a certain problem. When the buyer asks me, I am not willing to reveal it. But the interesting thing is, when I go to buy a car and I ask the same question, I expect that the seller will tell me the right thing about the car. So we see what I have to lose. And the things we pointed out are that in the beginning of the wrong action, when I'm deliberating the wrong action, there is conflict. In fact, the fact that I am deliberating the wrong action shows that I know what the right action is, but there is something that tells me, go ahead, do this, do this. So at that point, there is conflict. For some people, the conflict may last a little while, and for some people, it may give sleepless nights. And then once the action is committed, there is guilt. We said we can never get rid of this guilt because I cannot get rid of this half value. Because I expect everybody to treat me in a certain way, that half value I cannot give up. I will always expect others to treat me in a certain way. So I cannot banish this half value. And as long as this half value is there in my mind, it is there to remind me you're doing wrong and you have done wrong. So there will be guilt. And then there is associated worry and perhaps some fear of getting exposed, etc. But we said this is not it. There is the split between the knower and the doer that happens. And the split is a dangerous split because I am getting disintegrated. This is what then is like fracturing me. It creates a fractured being. A fractured being can never be a strong being. So when this fracture happens, then I lose my integrity. I lose the harmonious working of the components within me. And we said that if I make a pledge that I'll get up at 5 a.m. tomorrow, the knower is making the pledge. But if the doer is disintegrated from the knower, the doer snoozes the alarm clock. And similarly, this person becomes spineless, incapable of achieving the goals, that legitimate goals that this person wants to achieve. So this is one drawback. But we said this is not it. There is more. Even the legitimately acquired artha and karma that I have in my life, the various house and comforts and all that, and great food and enjoyments. This person, because of the split, may not even be present to enjoy it. So even the artha and kama, we said, they yield their security and pleasure only to an integrated person. Only an integrated person can really extract the security out of artha and the pleasure out of kama. If the person is not present, those things may be there, but the person is not getting the security and pleasure. And then there is more. There is a tendency to lie that is created. And that one may start with small lies and they grow bigger. And we will look at the third meaning of dharma later, but the third meaning of dharma is related to punyam and papam. And so one incurs papam in the process. That has consequences later. We will see that. And we said the way to the absolute truth, the way to this purnatvam, the way to the absolute reality is through this relative truth. If I compromise on the relative truth, then I cannot attain this absolute truth. And one becomes caged in this apurnatvam because this apurna entity is the one that is encouraging me to lie. This apurna entity is the one that is insecure, that incomplete, and the one that feels I will feel more complete if I complete this transaction with a lie. So when I'm giving in to the apurna entity, then I'm getting caged, imprisoned by this incomplete individual. And as we said, these values like truth, etc., manifest in a jnani spontaneously, in a jivan mukta spontaneously. So I'm just increasing the distance from myself and what a jnani is. So especially for a spiritual aspirant, one who aspires for jnanam, one who aspires for this knowledge, and this is something one has to be very careful about. So when I see all these drawbacks about how I am hurting myself, then I begin to see why this value is valuable to me. Like we said, Puja Swamiji, Puja Swami Dayananda ji said, the value of a value is a value is a value to me only when I see the value of the value as valuable to me. So this kind of an inquiry, it shows me why the value is valuable to me. Then speaking the truth becomes choiceless when this knowledge takes root in my mind. The knowledge of this assimilated, when these values are assimilated in my mind, are fully assimilated, then speaking the truth becomes choiceless. Choiceless meaning there it is very clear that that is something I don't want to do, much like I don't want to pick up some tasty food from garbage. I have a fully assimilated value for hygiene, so I never pick up tasty food which is lying in garbage. Similarly, when I have a fully assimilated value for the value, then I will not violate the value. For such a person, the life becomes simpler. A lot of struggles and decisions in our life are between two things. But if the value or the values become clear, then the options are reduced. So there's a lot of time, should I do this? Should I do that? Type of a question that arises in my mind, and there's a lot of struggle. But when these values are clear, then the options become clearer. In fact, they say that as a person becomes wiser, the choices become lesser. So there is another aspect to this, and this was a question that Rama had also asked about why does a person do wrong? Now, we had looked at this in the context of Duryodhana's statement. Duryodhana says, "Janami dharmam nachame pravrittihi, janamya dharmam nachame nivrittihi. Kenapi devena hridi sthitena yatha niyuktosmi tatha karomi." He said, "There's some force within me that's controlling me. It looks like he doesn't know." He says, "Kenapi devena." So Duryodhana is not very clear. He says, there is something within me that is controlling me. Even though I know what is right, I don't do what is right. So why does one do wrong? So let us do a deeper inquiry into this. The question is somewhat similar to why does one fall sick? If we look at it, there are two factors involved. There are the germs that cause the disease. They are the enemy. But then there is an additional factor involved, which is one's own immunity. If the immunity is strong, then the germs are eliminated even as they enter the system. But if the immunity is weak, then one is taken over by the germs. So, no doubt the germs are the enemy, but whether one falls sick or not is determined by how strong one's immunity is. And there are three kinds of diseases. Those, like we said, some are eliminated as soon as they enter the body because the immune system is strong. And then there are some other diseases where the immune system can still deal with the disease with some support. Like some vaccine may be required to boost the immune system. And then there is yet another kind of diseases where the immune system is weak and one requires probably several doses of the vaccine, and it takes time. It takes time for the immune system to develop. And we saw all this in the case of corona, for example, was vaccine dose 1 and booster dose 2 and so on. So now, taking this as the reference example, what is the enemy when it comes to adharma? What is the enemy and what is the immunity? So we saw Duryodhana's statement. He says he doesn't know who this enemy is the one that is making him do this. He doesn't know. Kenapi devena, he says, there's some force that is making me do this. And interestingly, like we said, Arjuna asks the same question to Krishna also. In fact, there is a striking similarity between Arjuna's question and Duryodhana's words. Arjuna asks, Atha kena prayuktoyam, Atha kena prayuktoyam, papancharati purushaha, anichhanapi varshneya, baladiva niyojitaha. So, Arjuna is also using the same similar words, baladiva niyojitaha, as if I'm constrained by some force. Kena prayuktoyam papam charati purushaha. Ayam purushaha kena prayuktaha papam charati. Why does this person do wrong? Baladiva niyojita, as if there is some force. And in fact, the word that he uses is niyojitaha. What Duryodhana says is niyuktosmi. Yatha niyuktosmi tatha karomi. Niyuktaha, he says. Here he says niyojitaha. They are all born from the same root. So there is a striking similarity. So they are both talking about the same thing. What is this force? And he also says, Anichhanapi varshneya. Without knowing, he knows that this is not right. Anichhanapi, without desiring, he gets into the situation. Anichhanapi varshneya. So that really means he knows that it is wrong, but he still gets into this situation where he does it. So what is this force? So is there some kind of a devil, like some people talk about Satan? So is there some devil controlling? Or there are others who say not even, a single blade of grass moves without Ishvara's consent. So is this Ishvara making me do all this? So in other words, is it karma? And in fact, very interestingly, in Panchadashi, Panchadashi is a text of 15 chapters by Vidyaranya Munihi. And Vidyaranya is one of the giants of the Advaita tradition. And his contributions to the tradition are immense in terms of clarifications, etc. So interestingly, in Panchadashi, Vidyaranya Munihi also takes this Duryodhana statement. Exactly the same statement. And he says, what is this force? And he takes this verbatim in Panchadashi. There's a verse which is the same as Duryodhana's statement. And in the very next verse, Vidyaranya Muni, he says, don't think because of this statement that there is no free will. That is what he says. So what is this? What is this really? And Krishna answers the question in the very next verse, because he is answering Arjuna's question. So Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajo Guna Samudbhavaha Mahashano Mahapapma Vidyenamiva Vidyenamiha Vairinam. So this is verse, the Arjuna's question is verse chapter 3, verse 36. So if you have your text, you can look at it. Atha kena prayuktoyam papancharati purushaha anichhanapi varshneya baladiva niyojitaha. And then verse 3.37 is kama esha krodha esha rajoguna samudbhavaha mahashano mahapapma vidyenamiva iha vairinam. So Krishna says, this force that you're talking about, it is kama, it is krodha. And he says, eshaha kamaha, eshah krodha. And he uses the word eshaha. Eshaha means this. So it is not something remote somewhere. This eshaha, this. And it is something intimately known. So it is not something that you don't already know about. You already know about this kamaha, because desire, kamaha means desire, and desire is known to everybody. Even though things desired are different from person to person, desire is universal. And so also anger is universal. These need not be taught. That is what is implying. Esha kamaha, esha krodha. The question is, how is this born? He says, Rajoguna samudbhavaha. So what is Rajoguna? So there are, Vedanta talks about this entire creation emerging out of Maya. We will look at it later when we look at this Srishti Prakriya, how this creation comes about and all that. But this entire creation is a product of Maya. And Maya is said to be Trigunatmika. So Maya is of the nature of these three gunas. Its nature is these three gunas. That's what Maya is composed of. And these three gunas are Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So these gunas, these Maya makes up everything in the universe. So these three gunas are present everywhere in the universe, including our own mind. So what is the Sattva? The Sattva is something that is related to knowledge. So this Sattva, if the mind has Sattva, that means one likes things related to knowledge. The mind becomes disposed towards knowledge. Then what is Rajas? Rajas is something that makes the mind active, engages in activity. And what is Tamas? Tamas is what causes the mind to rest. So tamas is very important because tamas is what brings about sleep. And we know how important sleep is. So all these gunas have their role to play in the creation. So here Krishna says, Rajo guna samudbhavaha. This kamaha, this krodha is born out of rajoguna. So then why is this a problem? Krishna says, Mahashanaha. Mahashanaha. What does Mahashanaha mean? Mahat Ashanam Bhojanam Yasya Saha. One whose bhojana, one whose diet is enormous. So one that likes to eat a lot. He says his desire, Kamaha likes to eat a lot. So any amount of desires we fulfill, it wants more. That is what it means. Why? This is interesting because this is related to some of the initial discussions we have already had. I feel apurnaha. It is related to this apurnatvam. I feel apurnaha, and as long as I feel apurnaha and I am seeking for fulfillment, we said I want to be fulfilled. So we are seeking for fulfillment in the right hand side of the statement. So I am apurnaha, assumed I am apurnaha, and I am seeking for fulfillment in the right hand side of the sentence. That means basically I'm seeking for fulfillment in the world. So all these desires are expressions of this one basic idea that I am apurnaha. Once I have concluded I am apurnaha, then and I clearly know I'm seeking purnatvam. I want to be purnaha. So I'm trying to bridge this gap. And in any time I want to bridge this gap, it results in a desire. I'm trying to bridge this gap through desires, basically. So as long as one doesn't attain purnatvam, one will continue to have desires. And that is why it is like the lady with the necklace on her neck who thinks the necklace is lost. As long as she thinks the necklace is lost, her seeking will never end. She'll continue to look for the necklace here or there, here or there. So basically, but we think that I can somehow bridge this gap, and that is what causes desire after desire. So if happiness was to be described as number of desires I have divided by number of desires it's the other way around. If happiness is defined as number of desires I have fulfilled divided by number of desires I have. Let us take this formula. So I start off with none of my desires are fulfilled and I have 10 desires. So I think that as I make the numerator of this, as it goes from 1 to 2 to 3, my happiness will increase. So if I have 0 desires fulfilled, if I fulfill 1, it will become 1 by 10. And then it becomes 2 by 10. And then it becomes 3 by 10. And so on. I'm thinking that someday it will become 10 by 10. But Mahashanaha, what happens is as I'm approaching 8, 9, there's a strange phenomenon that happens that the numerator has been increasing all right, but as I approach 7, 8, 9, the denominator begins to increase. So then as I come to 10, and then I think I have accomplished, when I look at the denominator, it has become 20 or 30 or even 100. The desires multiply. So if I am trying to reach this through this mechanism, Vedanta says it will lead you, you will basically stay in the same place, because 1 by 10, you started with 1 by 10 and then you have brought it to 10, but then the denominator has become 100, so it has become 10 by 100, which is the same as 1 by 10. So you're basically thinking you're accomplishing something, but you're staying in the same place. And that is why Mahashanaha. And then it is Mahapapma. Krishna says this is what causes you to transgress dharma. Because I have this feeling that I will become Purnaha, then and if I have these half values, etc., then I'm willing to compromise for the sake of my fulfillment. Now, interestingly, Krishna uses a singular word here. Even though Krishna is talking about two things, Kamaha and Krodhaha, all the other things are singular. Rajo Guna Samudbhavaha, Mahashanaha, Mahapapma. So all of these are singular. Krishna is not using dual words. Because in Sanskrit, always Ramaha, Ramau, Ramaha. There's a dual for everything. So if there are two things, why did Krishna not use dual? Rajo Guna Samudbhavau. Why did he not say that? Because Krodhaha is just a modification of Kamaha. When the Kamaha is obstructed, when my desire is obstructed, it gives rise to anger. So Krodha is not something else. When my desire is obstructed, it gives rise to anger. And when my desire is fulfilled, what happens? When my desire is fulfilled, then it turns into greed, lobha. So either way, either in one side I end up in krodha, in the other side I end up in lobha. Why are these enemies? Because they distract one's mind. So the desire is the enemy. This desire is the germ. Let's go back to our example of the disease and the immune system. This desire is the germ that enters the mind. It distracts the mind to materialism and makes a person extroverted. And then the angry person can even act with violence. And then one mahapapma, which makes one do adharma, and adharma, as we said, destroys the harmony at all the levels, whether it be the individual level, whether it be the family level, whether it be the society level, etc. It destroys the harmony. So if we look at the parallels between our disease example, disease immunity example, we said, okay, Krishna is saying that this kamaha, this desire is the enemy. I mean, look at it next, that not all desires are an enemy. There are some very good desires as well. So everything cannot be classified as an enemy. We will see that. But what is the immune system here? What is the immunity? Let us look at that a bit. So the immunity is our vivekaha, the discrimination, the discriminative thinking about whether this is the right thing to be done or not. So here we are not talking about the Atma, Anatma Vivekaha. We are talking about Karya Vivekaha. Vivekaha about what is Dharma, what is Adharma. So karya, the word karya means that which is to be done. Karya. And akarya means that which should not be done. So karya vivekaha means vivekaha concerning dharma versus adharma. Kartavyam versus akartavyam. That which should be done versus that which should not be done. And we said, like, the sattva guna is what determines the knowledge factor. So this vivekaha is born out of sattva guna. And the ultimate immunity is Atmajnana. Because Atmajnanam, as we said, leads to Purnatvam. And when that Purnatvam is there, then the need for the seeking itself ends. One may still have desires, but like we said, those desires are born out of fulfillment. They are not desires for the sake of fulfillment. So when Atmajnanam uproots the needs for desires for the sake of fulfillment. Therefore, Atmajnanam is the ultimate immunity. But until Atmajnanam is attained, here we are talking about this in the context of Dharma. Why? Because we are talking about Adhikaritvam for the preparation for Vedanta. So in this case, the Vivekaha refers to Dharma Vivekaha, Karya Vivekaha. So the lack of vivekaha is due to half assimilated values, and that is why the discussion we had in the last class is considered to be important. Not seeing the value of the value. So whenever there is a conflict between kamaha, like the desire, fully assimilated value for money, that is kamaha. In a particular context, one wants to make that extra money for the sake of one's purnatvam. So this fully assimilated value for money is basically kamaha, and that comes in on a wrestling match with this half value, and the winner is very clear. The kamaha wins because this is like the immune system not being strong enough. So vicharaha, the kind of contemplation on the values, is the seeing the value of the value is what helps convert these half values to full values, and these full values can then engage in a more with a level playing field. They can engage in a wrestling match. In fact, if the value is fully assimilated, we say that the wrestling match may not even be there. It will be like that strong immunity that eliminates the germs even as they enter the system. So vivekaha is like the immune system, and vicharaha that helps cultivate these values, convert these half values to full values, is like this vaccine or booster. Now we come back to what is the enemy. Krishna says kamaha. So are all desires a problem? You say no. There are auspicious, there are desires in line with dharma. And these desires actually help one grow. For example, the desire to do service, the desire to do duty, the desire for these qualifications, the desire to study the Shastra, the desire for satsanga, or the desire to attend the Vedanta class. So these are dharmic desires. And we say even the desire for money can become a dharmic desire. If one wants to make the money, then deploy it for dharmic purposes. Which with doing service, etc. So that is why danam, we talked about danam. So as one earns, if one also does the danam, if one reaches out, then that is clearly a dharmic desire. That is why elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gītā itself, Sri Krishna says, Dharma viruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshapha. Dharma viruddha kamaha. Dharma aviruddha kamaha. That desire which is not opposed to dharma. That desire, Krishna says, I am in the form of that desire. It is a very auspicious desire, pursue it. So such desires are not a problem. They are not the enemy. Then what is the enemy we are talking about here? It is the dharma viruddha desires. Those desires that have that very clearly, those desires that are against dharma. A person may have such desires. That is number one. But then we also talk about any desire, if it becomes an obsession, then that can also be this enemy. And both of these, whether it is a dharmic desire or any desire, even perhaps for a material thing like a phone, the desire for the phone, if it becomes an obsession, then that has the capability to overpower one's immune system, one's viveka. So these desires, how does this actually happen? How does this overpowering happen? So in the very next verse, that is 3.38, chapter 3, verse 38, Krishna says that there are these three kinds of covering of the vivekaha that can happen. So dhume navriyate vannihi yatha dhume navriyate vannihi yatha darsho malena cha yatholbenavruto garbha tatha tenedamavrutam. So Krishna gives three examples of how this covering of the Viveka Shakti, one has this Viveka Shakti, which is like our immune system. How do the germs take over the immune system? So similarly, Krishna says there is this Viveka Shakti that is covered by this Kamaha. And how does that happen? So Krishna gives three examples. Dhume navrit, dhume navriyate vannihi. So dhumena dhumena avriyate vannihi. Vannihi means fire. So like a fire gets covered with smoke. So sometimes we see that this fire gets covered with smoke and then the fire is not visible. But this is not a very serious problem, because if you fan it a little or if you blow it a little, that smoke disappears and the fire comes out in all its brilliance. Then there is a second example, yatha adarshaha malenacha. Adarshaha malenacha. So adarshaha means a mirror. So the way in which a mirror sometimes gets covered with dust. The mirror cannot be seen. So this takes a little bit more effort. If you blow it, that is not enough. You need to take a wet cloth and wipe it. And then the mirror becomes visible. And then there is a third covering, kind of covering, which is of a more serious type. He says, Yatha yathol bena vrito garbha yatha ulbena avritaha garbha. So just like a fetus is covered by the womb. So in this case, the fetus basically cannot do anything because it is in the womb. And it takes time for the fetus to grow. And then finally, the fetus has to be there for 9 months. So some growing up is required to gain a certain mastery over the desire. Like a child growing out of toys, a child designing balloons on the 25th birthday, the child doesn't ask for a balloon. So this is the three kinds of immunity that this similar to the three kinds of immunity we talked about. Some desires, they enter the system, they can be dismissed with some vichara, because the samskaras of this viveka, the viveka is already there. The immune system is already there. With some light blowing away, the smoke disappears. Similarly, when a desire enters, then if one really inquires into, do I really want to pursue this or not, and looks at the implications of it, does the kind of analysis we did, then the vichara results in the desire just evaporating at that point. And then we talked about the other two, which is similar to the cleaning of the mirror. It takes not only vichara, but some effort, some will is also required. And then the third kind, where the immune system is weak, it needs some development, is compared to this fetus in a womb. So how do these germs enter the body? In case of the disease, it is basically lack of hygiene. During the corona time, we saw all these WhatsApp videos about how we should wash our hands for 2 minutes, front and back, and all this all boils down to hygiene. So similarly, is there some kind of hygiene here as well, a hygiene factor here? How do the kamaha and the krodha enter the system? And this Krishna talks about elsewhere. And that is the verses in the second chapter, verse 62 and verse number 63. So there, Krishna describes this. Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha. So this is verse 62, chapter 2. Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha Sangasteshu Pajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kamaha Kamat Krodho Bhijayate Krodhat Bhavati Sammoha Sammohat Smriti Vibhramaha Smriti Bhramshat Buddhinashaha Buddhinashat Pranashyati. Krishna says, verse 62, Sangasteshu Upajayate. Upajayate means something is born. Upajayate. What is born? Sangaha Upajayate. Sangaha means a certain fondness. A certain fondness is born. How is this? For whom is this fondness born? Certain fondness is born for something. For whom? For whom? Dhyayataha pumsaha. The person who is thinking, who is brooding over something. For a person who is brooding over something, a certain fondness is born. Fondness for what? What is this person thinking about? Vishayan. So dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangasteshu pajayate. For a person who's thinking about objects, a certain fondness is born. And then sangat, from this fondness, sangat sanjayate kamaha. From this fondness, desire kamaha is born. Sanjayate kamaha. The interesting thing is Krishna starts off with thought. They start with thought, basically. The desire starts with a thought. Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha, Dhyayataha Pumsaha, the thinking, brooding person. What is he doing? He's engaging in thoughts. Thoughts about what? Thoughts about objects, Vishayan. So they originate in thought. And we say there are three kinds of thought a human being can have. If you classify all possible thoughts a human being can have, it can fall only into these three categories. Thoughts that are born out of objects. When I see a pot, automatically a pot thought is born in my mind. Helplessly, I cannot do anything about it. I see a pot thought will be born. That is the nature of this system. It cannot be that I see a pot, but there is no pot thought in the mind. So one category of thoughts arise from objects. The second category of thoughts arise from within the mind itself. We say these are vasana based. Basically, the mind has got these tendencies internally. And a lot of those tendencies are latent. We say these tendencies are acquired from multiple janmas. So this mind has these tendencies. The second category are vasana based. Then there is a third category of thoughts, which we say are not object based, are not vasana based. And what are they based on? We say they are will based. So I say, I want to work on something for the next half an hour. And then I use my free will to entertain certain thoughts. For example, I want to do japa for the next 20 minutes. When I engage in the thought of the japa thought is my free will that is doing. Or if I want to work on a project at work and I shut myself off and I'm focusing on it, and then I'm thinking about a particular problem and I'm debating the pros and cons, etc. Those are all my will-based. And what Krishna wants to point out here is that we need thought hygiene. So this hygiene that we talked about in the disease case, that Krishna says if we don't have hygiene with regards to our thoughts, then that will lead to kama. And that is the sequence that Krishna describes here. So we are running out of time at this point, and we will take this up in the next class, including the Shankara Bhashyam, parts of the Shankara Bhashyam for these verses. So I'll conclude at this point. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. If there are any questions or comments on what we discussed, we can take them now.
Sir, my name is Vishwanathan. Can I ask a question?
Yes, yes. Yeah, actually, you're also welcome to. You are welcome to. If you are comfortable, you can also turn on your videos. At least an associate.
Yeah. So currently my camera is not working, so I'll try
Okay.
to
Sure.
rectify it next week and show my face.
Sure.
My question is to control the thoughts. The only way is to go for meditation.
So actually, there is. We are talking about the whole context of this discussion. If we see, is the preparing the mind for the study of Vedanta.
Right.
And as we said, there are qualifications that are needed for the adhikari. So that is the context in which we are discussing this. And we say that dharma, right? Dharma is a very important uh, gateway, sort of, to get this preparedness. Now, given this, we are talking about encouraging dharmika thoughts, and we will talk about this later, but we want to have some alertness of the mind, right? There has to be an alertness of the mind in order to nip those kinds of thoughts that are going to lead me in the wrong direction. So that alertness of the mind is what the hygiene is that we are talking about. So now what happens is that there are certain systems that say that we have to control the thoughts, right? And in fact, we look at the aim of yoga, for example, and it says yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So yoga is one of the other darshanas that we talked about in our previous classes. So the aim of yoga is to basically chitta vritti nirodha, to control the thoughts and eventually lead to a thoughtless state. So we say the aim of Vedanta is not this thoughtless state. That is where Vedanta differs on. There are other differences also, but one of the differences is the ultimate aim of Vedanta is not some kind of a thoughtless state. Your Jnani engages in the world. And like we said, if we see a pot thought will arise in the mind. So it is not elimination of these thoughts. then what is the aim? The aim is to be able to gradually nudge my mind, right? So even control can lead to suppression. So suppression is not the goal here. But the aim is to gradually nudge the thoughts, gradually take my mind in a direction that moves on the path of dharma. So whatever is required to gain a certain mastery, so a certain mastery of the thoughts, right? To be able to display the thought that is leading me in the wrong direction with something else. So those are all some kind of skills that the mind needs, some kind of mastery of the mind needs. It is not some total, the conquering all thoughts kind of thing. That is not there, because eventually a jnani may get all kinds of thoughts based on objects, like we said. So those thoughts enter the mind, but then the fact that they enter the mind is not a problem. As the immune system becomes stronger and stronger, right? Those thoughts will enter the mind, but then they leave the mind. They don't cause turbulence in the mind, so to say. So basically, yes, there is a certain mastery over thoughts that is needed, but it is not in the form of suppression or in the form of thoughtlessness.
So subsequent question, sorry, other people also would like to, the last question from my side.
Sure.
When you talk about, you gave an example of the selling of a car and then having a defect, and then you want to hide the defect to the buyer. And now here, your inner voice says that you should not tell lie. But the ultimate goal is I want to make money out of my car without hiding the defects. Now this kind of a thought process only I'm trying to control. But how is it going to be? Maybe you may be teaching us in the next class, or how is it going to be?
Yes, basically what we say is that the practice of meditation definitely helps there. And that is why, in our tradition, if we say Sandhya Vandanam is there.
Yeah.
Or Gayatri Japa, basically any form of japa that we take, it develops this skill gradually.
Okay.
So the meditation is not trying to enter a thoughtless state, but in order to displace the thought in the form of japa, etc. So japa is a very useful skill, and that is why it is to be done. Why we have it that you do it 3 times a day during Sandhya Kal.
Yeah, yeah.
And so those kinds of things definitely help with this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So anything else? So should we conclude then?
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Hari Om.
Dhanyavad.
We will
Hari Om.
meet in the next class. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om. Thank you.
Hari.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.